Hi class. Since I couldn't see you today, I wanted to go over your quiz 3. So I posted your scores on Canvas for quiz 3, but let's go over the answers and how to answer the best way. Yeah? So first of all, we started with this listening section, part 1, and it says how to improve your memory. Listen to the first part of the conversation with Charles Long about how to improve your memory. Remember to choose true or false. Next, change any answer to be true. So those directions are important. You don't only choose true or false, you also change the false answers to make them true. So there's 2 things that we have to do when we listen. So we're going to listen to this together. Let's do it now.
I'd like to welcome Charles Long to the studio today. Welcome, Charles. Now, Charles has just published an article in New Science Journal about memorization. It's all about how to make our memory function better. Charles, exam time is on its way and there'll be lots of teenagers tuning in today. Can you give us some advice about improving our ability to memorize?
Hello. Yes, of course. I'd like to start by talking about the process of memorization. It's vital that we understand the process if we want to make adjustments to the way we function. We all use memory in the same way. It doesn't matter whether you're a student revising for your finals or an adult standing in the aisle of a supermarket trying to recall a particular item from a grocery list.
Yes, I'm afraid that's me. I always forget to take my list.
You and thousands of other people too, Mary. We learn to use our memory when we are still at nursery school. Young children are naturally very good at working out how to remember things. The tips I'm going to share today are based on the things we used to do to help us remember when we were children. The process of memorization occurs in 2 distinct forms. Do you know what they are?
Are they long-term memory and short-term memory?
That's right. But these aren't completely separate concepts. We use a combination of both types of memory when we want to formulate our thoughts and recall information, whether we're trying to remember something from a decade ago or just an hour earlier.
So that's the listening section for number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now let's take it question by question. So the first question says, our memories all work in the same way. So let's listen to that part.
I'd like to welcome Charles Long to the studio today. Welcome, Charles. Now, Charles has just published an article in New Science Journal about memorization. It's all about how to make our memory function better. Charles, exam time is on its way and there'll be lots of teenagers tuning in today. Can you give us some advice about improving our ability to memorize?
Hello. Yes, of course. I'd like to start by talking about the process of memorization. It's vital that we understand the process if we want to make adjustments to the way we function. We all use memory in the same way.
Did you hear that? He said, we all use memory in the same way. We all use memory in the same way. That has the same meaning, right? As our memories all work in the same way. So in this case, we would circle true. I can't circle on here, but I'll highlight true. Now let's go to number 2. Children. Children are not good at remembering things. Let's hear what they say.
It doesn't matter whether you're a student revising for your finals or an adult standing in the aisle of a supermarket trying to recall a particular item from a grocery list.
Yes, I'm afraid that's me. I always forget to take my list.
You and thousands of other people too, Mary. We learn to use our memory when we are still at nursery school. Young children are naturally very good at working out how to remember things.
Young children are naturally very good at working out how to remember things. It's the same, right? No, it's the opposite. So, children are not good at remembering things. That would be false. How can we change it, though, to make it true? In this case, you could just take out the not. Or you could write in here, you could say, instead of not good, they are very good. Both of those choices will get points. Okay, let's look at number 3. So we talked about tips, ideas, right, for how to memorize. And here the question says, these tips come from doctors. So let's listen to hear. Do his tips come from doctors?
The tips I'm going to share today are based on the things we used to do to help us remember when we were children.
So he says the tips are based on things that we used to do when we were children. So the tips come from doctors? No, they don't come from doctors. We're going to say false. But now we have to change the answer to make it true, right? So where do the tips come from? These tips come from children. So I will write children. So if you put F, but you didn't change the word to make it true, then you got half a point. And then finally, we use both short-term and long-term memory at the same time to think and remember. Let's listen a little bit more.
The process of memorization occurs in 2 distinct forms. Do you know what they are?
Are they long-term memory and short-term memory?
That's right. But these aren't completely separate concepts. We use a combination of both types of memory when we want to formulate our thoughts and recall information.
We use a combination of both types of memory when we want to form our thoughts and remember information. So we're using both of these at the same time. And the answer would be true. All right, let's look at the second part. So the second part starts a little bit later. So let's listen to tips about how to memorize. So I want you to explain 3 tips, ideas about how to memorize. Not exactly his examples, not exactly what he did, but tips that you can tell other people. What should you do to memorize? And you're going to choose 3. So you can choose the 3 that you understand the best. You don't have to write one if you really don't understand it. Okay? So let's listen.
Tips have you got for improving the quality of our memory?
Right. Well, let's start with association.
Association.
Yes, we can use word association to remember an idea or a concept. This means choosing a word or phrase you associate with what you were trying to remember. The word needs to be something familiar that you come into contact with on a daily basis. So, for example, you can use the name of your pet dog to remember a scientific equation. Try it. Read the equation a few times and then say your dog's name again and again. Later, in your science exam, just recall the name and the whole equation should come back to you.
All right, this is the hardest one. So most people chose to skip it, and I think that's a good choice. But if you wanted to answer this tip, you said association, or you could also say word association. You don't have to use that word if you don't understand if you didn't understand how to spell it, but the important thing is to understand what it is. So notice the directions say use a complete sentence to explain your tips. Remember that a complete sentence starts with a capital letter. So I wanted all of you to start with a capital letter and then write a sentence. So if you wrote association, you got half a point because you didn't write a sentence. So a sentence would look something more like this. You can use word association to memorize. That means to use a simple word to help you understand or help you remember a more difficult idea. So he used the example of using, maybe you're trying to memorize a math equation and you are trying to memorize it with your dog sitting there. So maybe the name of your dog will help you remember that math equation. So that was a difficult one, right? So that's why I said you only have to do 3. So let's listen to the other 3. I think they're a little more clear.
It sounds too good to be true. What else, Charles?
Visualization is another trick we can use. So you have to visualize an image that is connected to the thing you need to remember. For example, if you want to remember the date that the Berlin Wall came down, you might visualize a picture of a wall with the date written on it in graffiti. The image of the wall becomes an important part of what you will remember. You can use several images in a row to remember things like information in a text or a list of ingredients for a recipe.
Yeah.
So he uses the word visualization. So you can use that word, but you don't have to if you just understand what he's trying to say. So he's trying to say that you can just picture in your mind or another way to say that is see in your mind a picture of the thing you want to remember. So for example, he talks about if you want to remember a recipe, you should see in your mind a picture of all the ingredients. That will help you remember more than just seeing the words written, but seeing the picture of all the ingredients that you will put in your recipe. All right, next one.
Yes, that makes sense.
Singing can help with memorization too.
Singing?
Yeah. So instead of reading a text aloud, you sing it. Singing is one of the most effective and earliest memory tricks that are used for learning new concepts. I used to sing lists of historical facts and dates. It works.
And did you have to...
All right, so most of you got the word singing, but if you just wrote singing, you only got half a point because you need to write a sentence. So singing what? So singing information can help you remember it. Some of you wrote singing can help you learn English. He's not talking about just learning English. He's talking about how to memorize anything, right? So you could sing your vocabulary words. You could sing information from a book. But if you put it into music, it can help you remember. All right. So you only had to write 3 tips, but let's listen to the 4th one.
Sing aloud in your history exams?
Not allowed, but one till last. It's particularly relevant for any students who have tuned in. Teach it.
Teach it? Teach what?
Teach whatever it is that you want to remember. So, if you're studying for an English exam, teach the concepts to someone else. It can be a real person, a friend in a study group is ideal, or it can be a pretend person. You can...
All right, so he says, teach it. And she says, teach what? He says, teach the information that you're trying to remember. So maybe you've noticed that when you help another student understand something, it makes you understand it better. So when you teach information, it helps you learn the information. All right, I hope that helps you understand the listening better.